Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Irons match preview with myself and Sloth. We've had a little bit of a break, Sloth. Elephant in the room. Babbling has been pretty inactive on this YouTube channel. So, again, apologies to everyone that watches us. We are getting back on it. We've had a few issues offline around kind of Wi-Fi and connections and things. We're hoping that they're getting resolved in the next few weeks. And yeah, hopefully before the transfer window is in full swing. We've got some new people on board, which we're really excited to announce. We can't quite announce it yet, but it's going to be very exciting for this summer transfer window. So stay tuned for that. This one is all about the Spurs match. I don't think I've been less enthused for a derby against Spurs than this one. I think Spurs fans will probably say the same, given the circumstance of both teams' league position, Sloth. Obviously, Spurs won 3-1 last night as of recording this in the Europa League. They're probably going to heavily rotate on Sunday. So we're not playing for anything. They're not playing for anything in the league. It's kind of a damp squib, really. But there's always that pride element on the line. You know, you don't want to be losing to your local rival. And especially for someone like Graham Potter that we're going to get into, the pressure is starting to mount on him as the coach and manager of West Ham. So firstly, before we get into the stats and the breakdown and everything that we normally do, what's gone wrong for both these clubs this season? Why are we both 16th and 17th in the league?
I think for Spurs, a lot of it has been the injuries. I mean, that's the kind of obvious one that I think everyone will point to and say, if you have a fully fit squad and you're lacking spots on the injury treatment table, then it's always a good thing. It's something that they've been hit hard by, and we have just got completely out of form players. I think Spurs as well have probably found that the step up in the amount of fixtures that some of these players have faced in comparison to, say, where they've come from, people like Odobert, who obviously was playing championship, from Burnley, and was just playing the league games, and cup games. It wasn't a European schedule. I think they've seen a step up in that area, and maybe that's impacted how people recover and things like that. I'm speaking hypothetical from sort of a sports science nerd point of view, but I just think that this is the season that both teams, even to be honest, even if Spurs win the Europa League, I mean, if that happens, and God, I hope it doesn't, it's one of those things where I think they'll want to forget about the league. They'll shout about the Europa League for ages and ages and ages, and it'll become intolerable. But it's going to be one of those things where they just completely forget about the season. And that's almost what West Ham need to do, I think.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, we cast our minds back a couple of years when we were in the Conference League semi-final, quarter-final. We found ourselves in a similar position to Spurs in the league. I think we were 15th or floating around there at the time. I don't think many West Ham fans will remember the Premier League season or want to remember the Premier League season from that campaign. But, that Conference League gave us everything that we've wanted as a West Ham fan. So I think Spurs, although they've had such a poor season in the Premier League, they'll probably be thinking the same thing. And, winning the Europa League, you get into the Champions League. Like, that's a huge deal for them, not just financially, but in terms of the pool that they'll have next summer. So, as you said, from a selfish perspective, we don't want Spurs to win it. So yeah, it's looking likely that it'll be a Spurs United final. But yeah, they've just been so poor in the league, and the stats suggest that for both clubs as well. So let's take a look at the tail of the tape between West Ham and Spurs so far this season. So very similar for points. West Ham 36, Spurs 37. We've scored just 39 goals. Spurs have actually scored quite a lot at 62. 58 goals conceded for West Ham, 56 for Spurs. And the positions are actually the other way around. So it should be 17th West Ham, 16th Spurs. When we move on to the expected data, it's a little bit better reading for Spurs than it is for West Ham. Our expected position there, 17th. So we're bang in line as to where we should be expected to be right now in the Premier League at this course of the season. It's not good enough. Spurs expected to be in 11th, so a few positions higher. Our expected points is pretty much similar to what we're actually on, so 36.91. Spurs, 47.90. Our expected goals scored is slightly higher than what we actually have at 45.46, which suggests we've been wasteful in front of goal. Spurs pretty much in line with where they currently are at 61.33. And that expected goals conceded, I mean, both clubs just one of the worst in the league. I think we're both in the bottom 5 or 6 in terms of expected and actual goals conceded in the Premier League so far this season. So not pretty reading for either club. I want to focus more on West Ham for now, Sloth, and the pressure that Graham Potter's now under. I think last weekend's collapse against Brighton kind of encapsulated what an awful season it's been supporting West Ham. And we were talking about renewing season tickets a few days ago, and they always keep us drawn back in no matter the situation. But this season is probably the one where I've maybe contemplated not renewing my season ticket, which is quite a big thing to say because I've had a season ticket for such a long time. There's just so much uncertainty at the club at the moment, Slough. How big is a game like this to for Graham Potter and for the players to almost reignite that, that faith and that passion going into the summer transfer window? If we could beat Spurs, albeit a weakened Spurs team or a Spurs team that isn't focused on the Premier League, it's still a big derby win. So how big is this for Graham Potter, and how big would it be for the fans to experience that?
I think it's big for the fans because, as you mentioned, it's a derby with Spurs. I'm not sure Graham Potter has any clue how big this game is for West Ham fans. And that is one of my major sort of sticking points. We hear about how he's supposed to be a clever and charismatic guy, and yet if you listen to his comments today in his press conference where he said that he hopes Spurs win the Europa League, like there are West Ham fans out there who will say that is a sackable offence. I just cannot get my head around why on earth he would sit there as a manager of it's not like he's completely new to the country and he doesn't know. Even if you bloody well are new to the country, you generally know who your rivals are. And I'm not saying that Spurs, this is the biggest rivalry in the Prem. I'm not saying that at all. But at least understand, read the room, read the club, read the vibe.
I don't know why he said it.
He's an idiot. That's why. He's clearly not either not bothered, or he is an idiot in the sense that he doesn't really care what the fans think because he's already got his back up. And
he also said that he doesn't care about the media perspective really anymore. That was kind of the line that came out of the press conference as well.
That's fine. That's fine if he doesn't care about the media perspective, but you should care about the fans' perspective. And that's what really baffles me.
Has it surprised you? Because it took me back that quote because of when Graham Potter first came in back in January time, we were saying how well spoken he is in these press conferences. It's a breath of fresh air. He's saying things how they should be said. And it's fast forward a few months later, we saw it at Chelsea. To be honest, it didn't take long for that to unravel in the media. It's now starting to get to that point, and we saw it against Brighton as well. A little bit of frustration. If you want me to swear, I'll swear.
I'm not a robot.
Yeah. And now we've heard this come out around, he hopes Spurs get the job done, get to the final and, whatever else he said. But I just can't fathom, A, why you would say that in the situation we're in, and B, why you would say it about your rival. Not even just it's not even like a Crystal Palace or, a different London club like Brentford. This is Spurs. This is our biggest rival in the Premier League. Bar Millwall is probably our biggest rival, full stop. So why would you say that when you're trying to get the fans on your side?
That's why I said he's an idiot, because there's no excuses. You are West Ham manager. You know the rules, you know the lay of the land when you come in, and it's such a stupid thing to say that the only thing that I can possibly think of to excuse it is idiocy. It's baffling to me. And if he'd caveated it and said, "I hope they get to the final and they lose to Man United," that would have been one the fans would go, "Oh, that's funny," a Spurs bottle another final, and you could kind of go, "Yeah, right then, that's pretty good." But I just genuinely don't understand what on earth he's thinking with that comment. It's so not, it's not disrespectful to the fans, but it's so sort of dismissive of a rivalry, and I don't know. I don't turn on managers. Even David Moyes, when he was doing well, I said, "Oh, give him another contract, back him," and he deserves a chance to build a squad. And even when it was kind of falling apart, it's he deserves a good send off, not to be hounded out of the club.
Yeah.
He's done nothing to warrant any sort of goodwill from the fans. The result against Arsenal was great, but still you have to do more from there. You can't just coast by and then get snippy with journalists and expect the fans to be okay with not only this but the kind of handling of the Fulkrug issue.
Yeah,
that's that's where the fans, I think, kind of not back Fulkrug, because we're very frustrated with Fulkrug, but we understand what he meant. And if anything, it's refreshing to have that sort of personality in your club. We want to see that more often. We don't want someone to come in and go, oh, well, we hope Spurs win because it will mean that there's an extra European spot, which is good for the league. And it's like, yeah, it's good for the league. It's not good for us because we're not bloody well going to be chasing that next season, are we? Like, if you're the damp squid who's in charge of our club next season, I can't see us pushing for that.
Yeah.
I am totally at a loss for what he's thinking. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the West Ham players more specifically. Let's round up the Spurs data from this season so far. So going forwards, they've actually been very good. They've got the 5th best defensive record in the Premier League with 62 goals scored, and the 8th best expected offensive record in the Premier League was 61.33. So they're actually doing pretty good going forwards. However, they haven't balanced out how they're playing. I think everyone in the league has seen it by now. Defensively, they have not been good enough. They've been too stubborn, and they've been continuing to leak goals. They've got the 6th weakest defensive record in the Premier League with 56 goals conceded. They rank 11th for expected points. They're averaging around 1.82 goals per game, but 1.65 goals conceded per game. And they're averaging just shy of 56% possession in the Premier League so far this season. So it's very clear. We don't really need to go into the details of how Spurs play. I think everyone watching as a neutral or watching this preview knows exactly how Ange Postecoglou will set up his side against West Ham. And it will be the same no matter what, even though there's probably going to be heavy rotation. Looping back to West Ham stuff, there's a lot of players that are in the firing line this summer. And when I say a lot of players, I mean a lot of players. There are not many that we would probably say, yeah, we want to keep them, or, 100% we have to keep them at the club. I can probably think of 3 or 4 names in the back of my head right now that I would say, yeah, we should do everything we can to keep these players. But there aren't many of those. And there's a lot of change that is probably going to happen. We've said it before. Is Graham Potter going to be that person in the summer to revolutionize and transform this West Ham squad? I'm not so sure. There's obviously been a lot of movements with, a lack of director of football now. David Sullivan coming back into the fold and taking more control of transfers. How much of aside from Graham Potter a second off, how much responsibility do these individuals within the squad have to take? The likes of Paqueta, the likes of Kudus, the likes of, even fringe players like Danny Ings, Guido Rodriguez, these types of players that haven't made an impact or on high wages and, have played at the highest level. How much do we have to point towards these players that they have not done enough this season? It's very easy to blame Lopetegui. It's very easy to blame Potter. But how much do the players need to take responsibility for what's happened so far this season?
They have to take the lion's share. They're the consistent element this season. They are the ones who have been on the pitch for the 90 minutes. And yeah, when you can say, oh, the manager should have done this, and we in particular have been very vocal about players like James Ward-Prowse inclusion at times, and you can criticize that. But at the end of the day, we're armchair managers. That's not disrespect to say. We're having an opinion from an armchair, and we're saying, this is what we would have done. Well, if at the end of the day he tries that and it fails, then it's not only a reflection of us, it's a reflection of the players as well. Every single system is reflective of the performances that are given in it. And I mean, it's not just sort of things like off-field issues where you can really kind of begin to criticize and say, Paqueta's had this investigation over his head for a long time now. It's not like it should be constantly causing him to perform poorly. Mm-hmm. And I know people might go, oh, well, you think about his mental health, and don't get me wrong, that is something that can be very difficult to deal with. And as someone who works in mental health, it's not something that I would downplay. But when you are paid a huge amount of money to give performances, and your role is very clear within a team, and you consistently underperform, I think that's when you start drawing criticism. It's the same with Kudus, someone who, by I think every football fan's metric, is incredibly surprised at just how poor he has been. Yep. It's consistent underperforming, and players like Jean-Claire Todibo, well, you know what? If he can't stomach 90 minutes of football, I know he just got his first 90 minutes under his belt, but it's taken him so long to get there.
Yeah.
That for me, that is the basics of your profession. You should be doing extra training sessions if your body will let you to like make up for that. And I just think we're in a situation where we're incredibly lucky. There's 3 teams in the league that are worse than us, and
Well, that is it, isn't it? Stuff we're 17th, and we're only above all of the teams that got promoted from last season, and they've been, so much worse, and so their squads are so inferior to the rest of the Premier League that it makes it so difficult for them to compete. And the way they're playing hasn't been the best. But when you look at West Ham, I think you kind of alluded to it there, Sloth. The biggest frustration this season, aside from the managerial stuff and the tactics and what we've been through this season, it's the players and the level we know they can perform out. This squad, there were significant players within the squad last season that went toe to toe with Bayer Leverkusen, which were one of the best teams in Europe. There's no reason why we cannot perform to the levels that we can come to expect. And I think that's what it is. We've raised the levels to a point where when players like Kudus, I know we're kind of singling players out, but there's so many, but taking Kudus as an example, because for me, he's been the biggest disappointment this season. He is someone that has an abundance of quality, like a hugely talented player. Last season, there were comparisons whether Kudus or Bowen is better. Like that's the level he was performing at. And rightly so, because he was performing so well. And there was also the output and the end product that came with that. This season, it's been an insane drop off, not just in terms of his output, but it just looks like application as well. And this isn't just Kudus. This isn't just a Kudus thing. The reason we're in the position that we're in now is because of the mentality. It's because of the managerial tactics that we're deploying, and it's the effort. West Ham do not look like a team that provides 110% on that pitch every day, and that's what we saw against Brighton, and that's why we collapsed against Brighton, because A, the mentality is not strong enough, and B, we just don't want it more than other teams. There's not that hunger. So for me, going into this Spurs game, effort shouldn't even be a question in this game. Mark Noble should be getting in that dressing room with these players. He knows what it means to play in these games, regardless of the situation I said at the beginning, where I'm probably less infused for this game than I ever have been, this fixture than I ever have been. And that still stands true. But the players have to change that. They have to turn that on its head when we step onto that pitch at 2 o'clock on Sunday. Like, it has to change. And that has to come from the manager. That has to come from the players themselves. And then the crowd will feed off that. These are the types of moments that you need to create to allow yourself to push on as a manager, as a player at West Ham. And yeah, it's just a really frustrating season. I'm glad it's coming to an end. But what do you reckon, Stuff? I just very, very quickly going into the lineups, because it's really difficult to see how we're going to perform. I think Fulkirk will come back into the team. I think we'll probably continue with the back three of Kilman, Mavropanos, Todibo. Souček and Paqueta as the pivot is probably the most likely as well, because of the performances of the likes of Ward-Prowse. Again, we don't know what's going on with Alvarez, but there's probably been a bust up. Emerson and Wan-Bissaka on the wing backs, and then you've got Kudus, Bowen, Fulkirk. And again, like, Spurs can heavily rotate. I think this is like 9 or 10 changes from the Thursday night fixture they just played. And it's still it's still a very strong team on paper. So yeah, it's still a difficult game. It's still, no matter the situation, these games are always going to be difficult. So what's your final thoughts and feelings going into it, Stuff? Are you confident, should I say?
I don't think I've been less confident or concerned about a game against Spurs in years. Like, I actually genuinely don't remember the last time I was as nonplussed about a game. And I've said it many times on this channel, and I'll say it on the TikTok as well. The babbling TikTok. If you want to see internet glitch free content there, then then give us a follow. And I'll be doing plenty of rants. But it's just the fish rots from the head down, and it's at the moment the rot has just spread to the very bottom, where the fans don't really even get that fussed about what should be a massive game for us. And I mean, I'd like to say I see us winning, but that'd be a lie. I think even against this weakened Spurs team, it's going to be a case of we have to pray we get lucky, and maybe we'll get some goals because we're so poor up top, and we're relying on a striker who has no fitness as well, and it's frustrating. I'm going to go with 1-1. I think.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. I think it will just be. I just want to see the effort. Like I said it just then. I want to see the players give absolutely everything into this game, and then we can work from that. There's positives you can take from that because to be honest, the result at this point it's irrelevant. Whether we win, well, not irrelevant, but it's not relevant to where we're going to finish. Really, we might finish a couple places higher, but for me, it's not. We cannot let Spurs win this game, especially between the Europa League semi-final. Second leg. They cannot come to the London Stadium and win this game. Our home record under Graham Potter has been so poor as well. So we need to see that switch. So yeah, hopefully we do. Let us know down below in the comments how you're feeling about this one. Are you excited? Do you see us winning the game against Spurs? And yeah, hopefully the season will end sooner or later and we'll get into that summer transfer window. As we said, we've got loads of really cool content coming and new designs, new concepts working on in the background that we're really excited to share with you all. So yeah, appreciate everyone's time watching the video. Leave a like if you did enjoy. Subscribe to the channel for more content coming up going forwards. And Sloth, until the next one.
Come on, you irons.